Arduino, and I'm doing a final project presentation for EE452, and my project is a recycling sorter. So I'll go ahead and start. What it does is it just sorts bottle caps and bottles, and so the bottles will go into one bucket and the caps will get scanned and go into another bucket. And the way it works is the items get loaded to a belt that's running, and there's an ultrasonic sensor that scans a larger object first, and if it recognizes something, it moves that larger object into a bin, and otherwise, if nothing gets scanned by that one, it just keeps going, and then another ultrasonic sensor scans a smaller object, and it sorts it into a different bin. So what I have in my system and the components that I have are two DC motors, which are driving the belt, two servo motors, which are manipulating the objects into the bins, two ultrasonic sensors, which recognize whether the objects are tall or short, and then I have a green and a red LED, which will go off depending on which sensor gets triggered, and it's being controlled by an Arduino Mega board, and I have a battery pack that's allowing the DC motors to run. So here's my flow chart for my sorter. So I have the power that goes on, and my input pins start, and in the beginning the belt starts going, and so the sensors are both reading, and the first sensor is trying to see if there's an object there. If there is an object, the motor stops. The servo motor pushes the object into a bin, and the LED green light goes on. And then the servo motor goes back, the light goes off, and the belt starts running again. If nothing goes through the first ultrasonic sensor, then the second one is scanning, and if it sees something, it also stops the motor. The second servo motor pushes the object into a bin, and a red LED light goes off, recognizing that there's something there. Once that gets pushed, the servo motor comes back, the LED red light goes off, and then it starts running again. So the motor keeps running, and it just scans objects as it's running. And I have a simulation model through Tinkercad, so we can go ahead and play that. We can see my motor is running there, and if this is a first sensor, if it gets triggered, the green light goes on, and the servo motor activates, and then it goes off, and then the motor turns back on. This is for the belt. And then if another object comes through and passes the green one but triggers this red one, this servo motor goes off, and the motor stops for a little bit, and then it stops there, and then it activates back. So we can see that the simulation is working, the motor is working, my servos are working, and the ultrasonic sensors are scanning. And so then I have an actual model that I built. So here's the belt running, and I'm loading objects. The green light goes off and scans. And then if I do a cap, it sorts it into a different one. And you can see the lights going off, and the sorting happening. Sometimes the belt doesn't stop in the right position, so the caps will go past the location. But we can see that the objects got sorted, so the caps went in here, the bottles went in here, and everything's working correctly, and the sensors are recognizing a bigger object from a smaller object. So one of the things that I needed was two DC motors instead of one in my actual system, because there was too much friction, so one motor was just not able to pull the whole belt. And like I said, the belt would not always rotate at the same speed, so it would not always stop at the same exact location because of friction, and just the design of the belt was not ideal. So the caps would not always stop right in front of the servo motors, but overall the system was able to recognize and get triggered if there were bigger objects and sort them from smaller objects. So the simulation model and the real world model actually worked very similarly. Some of the limitations would be maybe if there's an object that's neither a bottle or a cap, it would only get sorted by size anyways, so it wouldn't really recognize what it is. So the sorter could only separate bigger objects from smaller, and like my belt was not ideal, so the friction would vary depending if the belt would get caught up somewhere, and so it would stop not always at the same spot. So, and also another limitation was the ultrasonic sensors. They need objects directly in front of them, so because my objects were moving across them, sometimes they wouldn't scan ideally, so there's limitations with those. So maybe using like a switch or something else would probably be better. And so some of the things that could improve this would be adding a longer belt. That would create another option for sorting things that are neither a cap or a bottle, or maybe even implementing like an AI system that's based on images, and it would be able to recognize if this is actually a bottle or a cap and sort them properly, or creating a better belt system that's more smooth and it runs consistently, which would help with stopping at the right spots, and would just help the system function better. But in general, this belt system is working pretty well. It's being able to sort objects, and yep, that's my final project. Thank you for watching.